IVM.
Facebook or Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg bets that VR, AR, and immersive tech will become a part of daily life for ordinary people in the long run. The metaverse will change the way social interactions, business, medical, and retail industries work. Hello, I'm Shiladitya, and I'm going to be talking to Nisheeth Srivastava. In today's episode of Capgemini's Techipedia Series, we'll be discussing the metaverse and the many ways in which it's going to transform the world as we know it. We're going to get real meta, so let me get my coffee ready and we'll be back after this break.
Do you wonder why China does the things that it does? Or want to know how we could improve online privacy? Or perhaps you're thinking about how we can kickstart India's economy? If you'd like to search for the answers to such questions, check out All Things Policy, a daily public policy podcast that covers everything from employment figures to aircraft carriers. Tune in from Monday to Friday for new episodes and fresh takes.
Hi, Nisheeth. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very, very well. Thank you, Shiladitya. Thank you for having me.
No, it's great to have you here. And of course, this is Capgemini's Techipedia, the first episode. It's great to have you here as our guest today. I think, the topic we're going to discuss is something very interesting and can get very, very meta, to say the least. So why don't you, just to help everyone listening in, if you could give us a quick introduction about yourself, your background as well, and then the topic we're going to discuss today.
Let's just say I'm not a man of few words. So I'm an executive vice president with Capgemini in India, and I'm the chief technology and innovation officer. I also head what's called the India Industry Platform. I've been here for a few years now, but half my career I've been a startup guy. So much of what reflects in my work, comes from an orientation which, let's just say, is a little different from the usual corporate engagements you will have, the conversations you'll have, and it will reflect in my discussions today with you.
Amazing. And, that exactly is probably what we need, that perspective on the topic at hand. We're obviously talking all over, about the metaverse, about the new, I would say, dimensions that we are dealing with in our, day-to-day life. But before to dig deeper into that, maybe if we can first talk about the origins of this, where I think we've seen the terms like VR and AR and, metaverse more recently thrown around a few times in the past decade or so. So what actually is the origin of this technology before it became what it is today?
So there are plenty versions of what I would say would be strong early contenders to the origin of present day VR technology, including the Sensorama in the 50s, which were, like arcade type cinema booths in US, to the first portable head mounted VR, device in the 60s, and many others that followed. But the term virtual reality itself, or VR, was first used in mid 80s, I beg your pardon, by a computer scientist called Jaron Lanier, who's actually a very amazing personality. His parents were survivors of the Nazi Holocaust, and so he gained a very different perspective to life as the family, fled places and countries and lived rough in tents, etc. He then emigrated to the US for education, New Mexico University, and became a computer scientist. Interestingly, he worked for Atari, which was a very early electronic gaming company in California, which is where he got the inspirations. And he then co-founded what's called VPL, Virtual Programming Languages Research. And later they went bankrupt. So he sold all of his VR-related patents, etc., to Sun Microsystems. But here's the cool part: he's a visual artist. He's what's known as a computer philosophy writer. He speaks on topics like, cybernetic totalism and some other very really interesting topics. He's a futurist. He's a composer of contemporary classical music. In fact, he owns nearly 2,000 rare musical instruments, in his private collection. And it was Jaron Lanier who actually developed the gear, including goggles and gloves, to experience what he first called virtual reality some 37, 38 years ago. And
Wow.
VPL was the first company to sell VR goggles and white gloves. So, that's a very colorful and immersive origin for VR technology for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that, someone who has so much, I would say, rich culture and of course taste is the person who actually imagined the future as we are seeing it now. And, now today, probably the people who are experiencing VR, and in fact, all of us who have access to similar technologies, right in, let's say, comfort of our home even,
Yeah.
we are able to actually experience all of these environments which he and folks like him probably envisioned, right? Being surrounded by all sorts of simulations. In fact, what are those various types of, let's say, environments that sort of were the early VR based on?
What you just mentioned, living in tent sounds whatever it does, but that's what gave him the idea of what he called also geodesic domes, right? So, and look, life throws opportunities at you, scenarios, environments, and you just need to have that eye. Okay, so, and that's what eventually, went on to his vision of what would be known as virtual reality. But let me just come back to the question that you asked. So VR as it is today and the simulated environments that have spawned, as you see them around you, is a result of an evolution of many factors like, from space research to gaming to entertainment and those things over decades. The early examples of simulated environments that come to my mind are, NASA, you can't wish them away. In the early 90s, they designed a VR system to drive the rover, the robot rovers on Mars from Earth, supposedly in real time, okay, despite signal delays.
Right.
Sega and Nintendo, okay, virtual video games, they were never commercialized, but in the early 90s, they set the virtual reality gaming in motion. Right. I don't know if you recall the Second Life, okay, in 2003.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Today it boasts of thousands of virtual experiences and communities, but I do remember, I had just finished my graduation then. The idea completely blows you away, doesn't it? So, users could customize realistic avatars, meet with other players, create virtual items, own virtual property, exchange goods and services, just like we hear in today's future metaverse, right?
Yeah.
Then, we're users of the Google Maps, right, which was launched in 2007, which gave you a street level, 360-degree view. They hired a company, which used what are known as dodecahedral cameras, okay, to give that 360 simulation. And then I've got kids, okay. Very early on in life, they got onto what's called Minecraft.
Yes.
Okay, which was launched actually in 2009. It's consumed my kids'
It's
times
a
and
phenomenon.
years. It's extraordinary. It sets your imagination afire, you see. I'm not complaining. So, they had the free run at it. But speaking of kids, Shiladitya, right? You can't forget Disney, who in fact played around with the VR since 80s actually, but settled for IMAX screens and then, later blended, several 4K resolution displays in their eponymous Disney-themed caves, you see, to give that immersive feeling, without the queasy part of being in a VR.
Yeah.
And then museums, from the Louvre in France to the Smithsonian in US to the Tate Modern Gallery in the UK, all have many cool VR and immersive reality showcases for a while now, actually. Jurassic Park, fairy tales, many more contemporary subjects. So plenty of simulated environments exist today and for decades, actually.
So, Nisheeth, you mentioned like so many things that we can all experience, in reality today, like museums and so many other places where VR has become commonplace, or at least a technology that's used to, showcase mixed reality sort of experiences. But there's been a disproportionate sort of impact on the gaming industry, like you mentioned, especially with Minecraft and so many other sort of titles, right? What do you think is that about? I mean, how deep is that impact on the gaming industry?
So let me tell you another fun story, okay, to connect the origins of VR and gaming. And this one involves a different character, not the previous one. So this is a 15-year-old curious teenager called Palmer Luckey, who was a passionate collector and enthusiast of old VR headsets from the 80s and 90s. Okay, so this Palmer kid, a teenager, okay, used to frequent these liquidation sales and government auctions, for their relics of failed VR initiatives. Plenty of graveyards on the journey. And during one of these visits, okay, he bumped into John Carmack. I mean, if anybody who's a gamer, okay, would recognize that name. So John Carmack, okay, was the legendary gaming programmer of video games like Quake and Doom. Okay, and this guy, he was so impressed with this kid's vision, Palmer's vision, and with his, he'd created this duck-type prototype, okay, of VR headsets that he took to demo it in the world's topmost gaming forums. Okay, and that gained a lot of media publicity, a lot of public interest. Palmer, eventually dropped out of college, and started a Kickstarter campaign to raise $250,000 when he was just 19, and ended up raising $2.5 million instead. Okay, a super duper hit. Yeah. But get this, that VR headset would later be called Oculus Rift. Okay, to forever transform the virtual reality landscape. And within 2 years, Facebook acquired them for $2 billion. Yeah. Okay. From a $250K Kickstarter campaign to $2 billion in 2 years, and promised them, gave them a free hand, free branding, and which is when the Oculus VR headsets, okay, as we know them today, they hit escape velocity. So I wouldn't be far from the truth if I said that the gaming industry is what spawned VR tech as we know it today. But you see, the roles flipped when Oculus Rift was launched. The child became the parent, and VR tech, in turn, gave a massive fillip, okay, to the gaming industry in a legendary role reversal. As things stand today, VR gaming market itself, okay, just in the US alone, is forecasted to generate some $20 billion US dollars by 2025. And, it makes one wonder how the innovators at those Japanese gaming companies like Sega, Nintendo Virtual Boy, who ostensibly attempted the first VR headsets, for video games in the early 90s, how they might have felt about jettisoning their first mover advantage, you see. But that's the nature of innovation, right, Shiladitya? Right? Market timing and pulse is absolutely everything. A strong connection there.
No, absolutely. In fact, I want to go deeper into, obviously, the metaverse, because that's exactly what the Oculus has brought about for us, especially with the involvement of Facebook and Meta as we know it today. But before we do that, let me take a quick break and come back to talk to Nisheeth a little bit more.
Have you ever wondered where the business world is headed? How the ways in which we create, market, and sell to consumers will evolve? Or if we'll ever go back to wearing pants while working? For answers to all of this and more, tune into Advertising is Dead with me, Varun Dugirala. Every Tuesday, as I talk to entrepreneurs, leaders, and change makers from across business, media, marketing, and beyond. You can catch all episodes of Advertising is Dead on the IBM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get your podcast from.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. Nisheeth, you've been sharing some amazing stories with us on the origins of VR and now the metaverse as we know it, especially, with all the impact that it's had on, industry in the past. But now the word metaverse itself and, as it exists today, right, especially like you mentioned after the birth of the Oculus Rift and, how it's transformed. Could you tell us a little bit about that, that's existed, like you said, as a concept in gaming for much longer. So how has that evolved?
So the origins of the metaverse can be traced back to a 1992 novel, okay, a dystopian novel called The Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson, which is where you'll find the term metaverse for the first time. But, but basically what metaverse is a digital universe, right, created by using different technologies like virtual reality, mixed reality, augmented reality, there's augmented virtuality, artificial intelligence, right? Connectivity, 5G, right? The internet in itself. And I think, fundamentally, very importantly, cryptocurrency, right? All of these form the building blocks of the metaverse, okay? Now, when you look at metaverse, right, the key blocks, telepresence, okay, digital twins, and blockchain. Okay, so you see, telepresence is needed for people to interact virtually, right, between themselves as well as with the digital assets, like we saw, happen in Star Trek TV series in the 70s and 80s, right?
Yeah.
digital twins are at the core of what in Capgemini we call the intelligent industry or Industry 4.0, impacting manufacturing to remote maintenance and operations to supply chain, etc. And Shiladitya, this is across industries, okay, from automotive to medical technology, medtech as they call, to aerospace and defense, etc. And the third one I mentioned was blockchain, right, which is basically for trust and traceability for a myriad use cases that are emerging, particularly as crypto takes a firm root in many, many forms. Okay. And the infrastructure behind today's metaverse is being created by tech giants, right? So you've got Microsoft to Meta, or previously Facebook, right? Apple, Nvidia, Unity, Amazon. There are plenty of these guys, okay? Very large infrastructure providers. And of course, there are builders, right? They're like Decentraland, Roblox. If you've not heard of these names, you will. Minecraft, I mentioned. Then there's Niantic, okay, who created Pokemon Go, if you remember.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. And this allows a massive number of people to gather and transact in virtual environments across industries. Okay. So people use the metaverse to socialize, to buy products, or play games, or even interact with their colleagues in the virtual metaverse office, right? And the second point you made, right, that the concept existed in gaming for much longer. That's true. And it's also because, the massively multiplayer online games, or commonly known as MMOs, and film arcades and fun theme parks, right? They all share and actually precede many of the metaverse's properties of today. So games like Minecraft, GTA, which is Grand Theft Auto, the League of Legends, the World of
PUBGs of the world.
Crossfire, Counter-Strike. All of these have displayed so many of the present day metaverse attributes, and for decades now. And so when the technology manifests itself and appears across so many forms, right? That the time has come. Right? So no wonder.
In fact, just on that point, like what is a real metaverse one can jump into right now? I know there's a lot of grand plans by all of these very large firms, but what's, let's say, is a real world example of a metaverse which you think, amongst all of the things you mentioned, is fairly established, or someone is set the bar for what the future will be?
So I think Spielberg made it a lot easier for me to respond to that question for you to imagine. Have you seen Ready Player One, the movie?
Yes, of course.
There you go. So it was released in 2018, and those that have watched it can begin to visualize how the metaverse manifestations might look like in 20-25 years' time, right? Within the movie, right, much of humanity uses a virtual reality simulation called the Oasis to escape the real world, and everybody's life is intertwined in that simulation, right? With avatars and personas and special powers, props and coins to be won and losses to be made. And, the virtual reality even of careers and competition and even romance, right? So that's the thing about metaverse. You can be anybody, anywhere in a full 360 degree immersion, driven by superior user engagement and, cutting edge and rich game environment, and literally infinite content, okay, and a scenario of possibilities. So today, plenty of metaverse examples in existence. My favorite example would be Decentraland, okay, which is a virtual marketplace launched in 2015, so not too long ago, but it created the world's first iteration of a virtual democratic world. The concept of DAO, or decentralized autonomous organization. You'll read about that a lot these days.
Of course.
Where marketplace contracts and policies and rules and the entire framework, are governed by the user community. And even to what an avatar can wear or not, how auctions would work, what NFTs or non-fungible tokens are to be allowed, how to moderate content, what are the rules of engagement, etc. Okay. In fact, it's got its own cryptocurrency called Mana, and all of the transactions are recorded on a blockchain. So it's Decentraland is practically run like a nation, And you can begin to imagine with that example the many, many possible societal and even tribal scenarios of the future, right? And then, of course, Shiladitya, you'll have heard of the Fortnite VR concerts.
Of course,
So these concerts are from Epic Games, right? Which is a gaming company, which has actually set a scorching trail behind it. So you have Ariana Grande, okay, who's performed there. Travis Scott, 12 million people tuned in. Marshmello, they've all performed there. And, the rumor mill has it that, it's going berserk actually on when Lady Gaga and Maroon 5, etc. will perform.
Wow, so, imagine that.
Yeah, exactly. And, and you've got plenty of top tier concerts on Roblox and Minecraft VR as well, okay? And, but before, you and I aspire to be one of the hundreds of thousands of fans, present in those concerts virtually and immersively, interacting with each other, I think, you'll need 100 times more computing power collectively than exists today. So we may have to wait a while for that.
No, definitely. But I mean, this is definitely a reality that's already here, especially like you mentioned, gaming, entertainment. These experiences are possible today through these various platforms. But what's probably also most interesting, just to, bring us back to reality a little bit, is how will this impact the rest of our lives? Like how does the metaverse impact business or medicine or services and retail, like the things which we do daily? What do you see happening there?
So that's a long list of domains you've mentioned. Okay, it's worthy of a podcast by itself. But let me attempt that quickly. Yeah. So in terms of business, right, just to give you an idea, as the world moved towards total lockdown in 2020, Fortnite, okay, the Fortnite concerts that I talked about, made roughly, and get this, $300 million by selling cosmetic skins, dances, and pre-released game modes, to its users. In fact, Bloomberg suggests that the metaverse-related business is anticipated to reach some $800 billion by middle of this decade, 2025. So the business impact will be felt across industries. Yeah. Healthcare, you talked about, has been an intensely regulated field, but the pandemic itself, right, has fundamentally changed the outlook in many ways. So things are accelerating. For example, medical training and learning, right? Mm-hmm. How on earth would you have done it, in a remote world, right? I mean, imagine doctors, right? So VR is being used in the training of doctors and medical staff, providing a 360-degree view of ailments or offer replicating, real-world procedures. Telemedicine is extending these learning concepts to the real world, in fact, okay? Where remote specialists are guiding local healthcare workers to deliver superior diagnostics. In fact, even therapies like psychiatric consultations, right, with VR headsets in the metaverse, it brings a semblance of close proximity with the therapist, right? So the sessions become more effective, and you can't fool the brain beyond a point, but VR simulates the real world, right, far more effectively. Then, of course, surgical procedures, pre and post-op surgery assessments, wellness and fitness, right? Game mechanics in a non-game environment, right? To connect healthcare providers, patients, delivering physiotherapy remotely, smarter workouts, right? With virtual instructors and such. So
that's already happening. I think workouts have weirdly enough become virtual with your Oculus headset. I think I've seen a few of those.
It's huge. There have been many examples, and they're still being studied. You could have had motor impairment, okay, within your body, not able to move, but using a combination of certain types of music and certain game mechanics, people have been able to begin movement of limbs that hadn't earlier. So it's extraordinary what it can do, okay? Which is why top-tier medtech companies are acquiring mixed reality startups to merge the real and the virtual worlds, right? And that illustrates the way the therapeutic, the medical, the surgical environments, etc., will change in the coming years. So that's a lot going on in the healthcare world. On retail, okay, that's taken to the metaverse in a big way, if only to test the waters, but some pretty far ahead. So so we have now virtual estates like the Sandbox, it's called, where Carrefour, right? Carrefour is that retail giant. It's a European giant.
Correct.
Which has bought virtual land equivalent to a dozen or so supermarkets together, okay, to develop.
Wow. Yeah.
Louis Vuitton, LVMH, right? Nike, and many other top brands around the world, okay? Coke, everybody who you know, okay, are testing their toes in these waters. And, today Capgemini, we're engaged with many of them. I can't name them, of course, but what they're talking about is just extraordinary. Then auto giants, right? Like Hyundai Motor Company, they launched their, they call that the mobility adventure not on the sandbox, but on Roblox, featuring their products and the future mobility offerings immersively. So, if I'm a young enthusiast, right, aspiring to buy a car, for example, right, I can begin to imagine what the new technology is going to look like immersively, right? I might be able to drive it around on Roblox and get a feel for it. And then this was in the news, right? Nike acquired, an NFT studio which produces digital collectibles. 7 million people have visited. It's a superplex. It's called the superplex because now it's not just how many people can you hold, right?
Yeah.
It's how much of computing power, right, is needed to hold infinite number of people, right? So they call that the Nike land, again on Roblox, to view their shoes. And, they get real celebrities like NBA's LeBron James, by the way. So the interactions can be as close to the real thing as possible, right? So Nike and the customer experience part, right, which Metaverse actually fosters and encourages. So it gives you personalization, it gives you gamification, of the entire shopping journey. It gives you the differentiation you're looking for, individual to individual, while maintaining that, it's called the H2H, human to human interaction. That approach, is now becoming quite central to how consumers will increasingly purchase, it's said that they will purchase more often from brands that propose the augmented reality, than those that don't, right? So the boundaries between the real and virtual world are diminishing faster than we realize,
No, absolutely. I think, everything you spoke about has, I'm sure everyone listening in has either experienced it themselves or definitely come across it. It's that real now. It's no longer inaccessible or only in the domain of enthusiasts. It's very much in the world around us, and it's changing our lives. It's changing the way we interact, changing the way we work. So we have pretty much progressed into this sort of a futuristic world. It's just waiting for, more and more people to jump in and adopt. And, that's the biggest impact, I think, of all that, it is truly global. It is truly here. Computing and connectivity, like you said, is also here very much. I think India is also seeing that, the launch of 5G. So I think we'll only look forward to more and more immersive experiences in the metaverse from here on. But thank you, Nisheeth. Thank you so much for this conversation. This was amazing. And I think for everyone else listening as well, this was the first episode from Capgemini's Techipedia. And of course, if you have questions, if you want to be a part of this conversation, maybe even, ask yourselves about where you want to be in the metaverse, please reach out to us. I'll be sharing contact details. And of course, come be a part of the conversation wherever you're listening to this show. I'm on Instagram at Shiladitya, and I'll see you on the next episode of Capgemini's Techipedia Series.
Thank you so much for having me. And maybe the next time you and I will be together in the metaverse,
Absolutely.
Instead of being on the screen.
Exactly.
Enjoyed my session with you, Shiladitya. Thank you so much.
So like you heard, the metaverse is slowly going to change all our lives. From everyday social interactions to daily work, entertainment, gaming, whatever you probably will do in the future, there'll be a part of the metaverse in it. And that's one of the biggest things that society will change in the way they interact with everything around us. So if you have an opinion, come be part of this conversation on Instagram. I'm at Shiladitya, and I'll see you on the next episode of Capgemini's Techipedia Series.
Hello, everybody. It's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Cyrus Says His Cock and Bull, Cyrus, Naveen, Vagda, and Antariksh talk about the American mother who was arrested because her kid took marijuana-laced gummies to school. Vagda is a co-host for our show Press Decode, so if you haven't been checking that out, check her out on that show as well as this one. The Simplified Gang explore Mumbai through Naren's stories and observations. On All Things Policies, the Takshashila folk discussed the U.S. Supreme Court's potential decision to overturn Roe versus Wade. On the Life Manifesto, Zarina introduces us to Don Miguel Ruiz's 4 Agreements of Life. And on Hansavani, hear the store Nai Idga. It explores the role of media amidst a state of religious animosity in our country. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, we've been doing a series of profiles of people within the office, so do check that out for sure. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, don't forget to rate us on any platforms you're listening on. And you can also check us out on YouTube. We have a page on our website, ivmpodcast.com/YouTube, with a list of all our channels. We're also doing a small listener survey to better understand how you, the listener, responds to the advertising on our network. And also, we just want to know a little bit more about you. We would really appreciate it if you could spare a few minutes to fill it out. It will really help us build some better shows for you. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors on the network this week, SBI Life Insurance and Jupiter, a digital banking app. There's a quick survey to fill out on ivmpodcast.com/survey. It lets us know a little bit more about who's listening to us. And you know what? We're going to do a few prizes. So, we'll do a random drawing of maybe 10 people and we'll send you all some swag. Remember, that's ivmpodcast.com/survey where you can fill out the survey.